Hi, everybody. Welcome for joining us today. My name's Anna Molina, and I'm the field manager for Columbia River Keeper. Again, thank you for joining us for our Columbia Rivers Love Your Columbia webinar series. This is our first webinar, and I'm really excited. Our webinar today is Finding Strength in Nature, Turning to the Columbia to Persevere in the Pandemic. And we're going to be joined today by a licensed professional and counselor and friend of the Columbia River Keepers, Zoe Presley, in a little bit. And just so we get used to using the chat box, I see some of you are already doing this. If folks can put their name, where they're from, and maybe one of their favorite locations where they find strength, since we're talking about finding strength in nature, it would be great to hear from some folks. I see Jane Keating from PDX. She put the Leven Community Center Garden. I will have to check that out. I just recently moved to Portland, so I'm looking for places. And then we also have Susan. She says she finds peace in the forests of the Northwest, especially along the rivers. Rivers are beautiful. I love the McKenzie River since I lived in Eugene for a minute. So yeah, please take some time, introduce yourself in the chat. We're so excited to have you join us today. And I'm going to go through a little bit of a rundown of what we're going to be doing today. So we're going to kick off our webinar series with the Land Acknowledgement. It's a practice that recognizes and respects Indigenous peoples as traditional stewards of this land and the enduring relationships that exist between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. And then we're going to have Zoe jump on with us and give us a bit of a presentation of what is forest bathing. And then she's going to lead us in a few invitations for forest bathing. So please take a moment and locate a plant or a pet, or perhaps if your internet signal is strong enough, you can be in a space outside where you can participate in some forest bathing. And then after that, we're going to regroup a little and share some of our experiences in the chat as we're going through these exercises. And then that will be our webinar for today. So really excited to have you all here with us. So I'm going to start us off with our land acknowledgement. We at Columbia River Keeper recognize the unique and enduring relationship that exists between Native people and their traditional territories. We respectfully acknowledge that the places we are joining today's webinar from rest on the traditional lands of Native people who have cared for these lands and waters since time immemorial and continue to do so today. By joining today from my home in Portland, Oregon, which rests on the traditional lands of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes in this area. So that is our land acknowledgement. And I'm going to introduce Zoe if she wants to come on camera. Welcome, Zoe. Zoe, thank you for joining us today. I'm going to do a little bit of an intro. So Zoe Presley is a forest therapy guide who is also a licensed professional counselor. And Zoe was an instructor at the National University for Natural Medicine, where she taught a course on nature-based therapy for students of naturopathic medicine and acupuncture. So thank you, Zoe, for joining us, and I'm going to let you take it away from here.
Okay, thank you so much, Anna and Liz and Columbia River Keeper for inviting me to do this presentation. Forest bathing is really near and dear to my heart, and I'm so moved to see in the chat box how many people are participating from all over the country. So thank you so much for being here. So this presentation is about mental health, something that we've all been talking about all over the world, especially for the past 2 years. As we all know, for the past 2 years, we've been adjusting to physical distancing, wearing masks, limited social contact with loved ones, working and socializing remotely, educating at home, delaying or canceling plans, in addition to increased violence and poverty in our communities, polarized social and political ideology, and ongoing global unrest. These changes have been unrelenting and anxiety-provoking. As a society, we have clearly been struggling with how to address so many simultaneous problems. Many of us have been merely coping with life, spending 93% of our time indoors and a majority of our waking hours on electronic devices, essentially isolated from in-person social engagement. As a result, an alarming amount of people of all ages are developing mental health conditions ranging from anxiety, depression, stress, to self-harm, substance abuse, and PTSD. A recent report from the American Psychological Association showed that financial woes coupled with a barrage of horrifying scenes from Ukraine as Russia continues its invasion have pushed a majority of Americans to unprecedented levels of stress. The demand for mental health care has never been so great, and so is the need for a variety of approaches to support our mental health. For many less acute mental health challenges, such as mild depression and anxiety, apathy, existential dread, and disconnectedness, nature therapy can make a big difference. The late renowned biologist E.O. Wilson, known as the father of biodiversity, posited decades ago that humans are hardwired to connect with the natural world, and that engagement with nature has a positive impact on human health. In recent years, global research on forest bathing has confirmed Wilson's thesis. Results from Japan's multi-million-dollar research into the health effects of forest bathing showed that activity of beneficial natural killer immune cells, which defend against cancer and viral infection, significantly increase in the week after a forest visit. This is due to inhalation of photoncide, an essential oil found in wood and plants. Other research has demonstrated that levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, and blood pressure decrease with exposure to forest environments. Surveys tracking psychological responses to forest exposure showed that spending time in a forest reduces hostility and depression. Additionally, anecdotal reports from forest bathing participants highlight inner quiet, relaxation, diminished stress, and a greater sense of connectedness with nature and other people. Perhaps one of the most important benefits of developing an intimate connection with the natural world is exposure to examples of resilience. More than ever, our complex world is asking of us to access inner resources of strength and responsiveness. Nature provides endless inspiration for seeking light in darkness, exercising resourcefulness to accommodate changes, and persevering in suboptimal circumstances. Conceived in Japan, Shinrin-yoku, which translates to forest bathing, provides a means for deepening the intrinsically therapeutic experience of being in nature. In contrast to the activities that we typically associate with our time outdoors, which primarily involve exercise or indulging our intellectual curiosities, forest bathing entails a guided exploration of our sensory connections with the natural world and involves mindful attentiveness and imagination. The term forest bathing is somewhat of a misnomer because the activity does not necessarily refer to spending time in a forest and also doesn't involve bathing in the typical sense. Because the activity is about engagement with nature, rather than being in a particular place, forest bathing can happen in a city park, a backyard, or even indoors with a houseplant or natural artifacts such as stones, leaves, and twigs. Forest bathing invites participants to explore their relationship with the natural world, the sensations, feelings, and inspiration that are activated when we closely attend to our senses. For the sake of comparison, You may have recently gone on a walk or a hike. What was the quality of that experience? Were you socializing, exercising, identifying plants, or listening to a podcast? Forest bathing is a different kind of experience that is simply about being attentive to one's immediate surroundings. It doesn't entail a journey to a particular destination, so forest bathing walks often do not progress more than half a mile and can take place in a singular location. Forest bathing offers a simple structure of suggestions for interacting with the natural world, such as becoming aware of the multi-layered soundscape, noticing our feelings when we observe a falling leaf, or inhaling the damp bark of a Doug fir. These activities may seem underwhelmingly simple, but the truth is that most of us have not spent time with nature in these ways since we were children. And many children in today's world have considerably less engagement with the natural world than past generations. To get a sense of the subtleties of forest bathing, we can look to yugen, a word which refers to traditional Japanese aesthetics and was adopted from ancient Chinese philosophical texts, alluding to the mysteries of life. Yugen art forms such as poetry attempt to describe the subtle profundity of things that are tricky to pin down with language. Yugen illustrates the present moment experience. Miyamoto Kyo was a 14th century Japanese philosopher, actor, and playwright who incorporated themes of Zen Buddhism into his works. He wrote this poem, which beautifully illustrates the activity of forest bathing. While I read the poem aloud, I invite you to close your eyes and take in the words, noticing where your imagination takes you. I'll read it twice. To watch the sun sink behind a flower-clad hill. To wander on in a huge forest without thought of return. To stand upon the shore and gaze after a boat that disappears behind distant islands. To contemplate the flight of wild geese seen and lost among the clouds, and subtle shadows of bamboo on bamboo. To watch the sun sink behind a flower-clad hill. To wander on in a huge forest without thought of return. To stand upon the shore and gaze after a boat that disappears behind distant islands. To contemplate the flight of wild geese seen and lost among the clouds, and subtle shadows of bamboo on bamboo. The practice of forest bathing can be informal, such as a self-guided experience inspired by a book, such as the one being raffled off today, or it can be professionally guided. Training and certification for forest bathing guides are offered through the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy, and there are trained guides throughout the world. Guided forest bathing walks are typically 2 to 3 hours, depending on the group size. The walks are customized based on the ages and interests of the participants and can be especially helpful for groups attempting to cultivate greater group cohesion, address conflict resolution, and enhance group intimacy. And couldn't we all use more of that these days? If you're interested in further reading on the topic of forest bathing or nature wellness, I wanted to suggest these titles. I believe this webinar will be accessible to all of the participants afterwards, so you don't have to copy it all down now. But I'd like to move on to guiding you in a few forest bathing forest therapy activities. You are welcome to remain indoors, or if you are participating in this webinar through a mobile device, you may take this experience outdoors. I encourage you to turn away from your video screen for the activities. You'll be able to follow along with my voice prompts. If you are indoors and have a small house plant like this one, go ahead and get it and bring it back to wherever you are seated. Otherwise, you may consider gazing out the window at the landscape. If you venture outdoors, find a quiet spot to sit or stand near a tree or other plant. Let's take a minute to get situated, and then I'll continue. All right. So the primary goal of today's experience and forest therapy in general is to support your health and wellness through guided immersive experiences within the natural world. Forest therapy traditionally follows a basic sequence of activities which encourage sensory exploration and contact with the present moment and place. My role is to provide you with invitations for creating and sustaining safe, meaningful, and relational contact with the natural world. The model of forest therapy that I have been taught was inspired by Japanese practices of forest bathing, but this approach today you'll be experiencing has been adapted to address differences in culture and natural environments, as well as through the webinar forum. An important aspect of forest therapy, and also to Columbia River Keeper, is awareness of who lived on this land before it was developed by white settlers. Archaeological evidence proves the existence of human habitation in what we refer to as the Columbia River Gorge, preceding the Ice Age, but most traces were swept away by the massive Missoula floods. The earliest documented people in the Columbia Gorge are those who were present at the arrival of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Many different autonomous groups lived on the banks of what was called Nichiwana, or the Great River. For those people, salmon caught in the river were a food source and a connection to spirit. With the introduction of white settlers to the area came upheaval and aggression against the tribes, as well as disease. Descendants of these tribes now live on the Yakima, Umatilla, and Warm Springs reservations. So much more information about the rich history of Nichiwana inhabitants is available online in books and at the Columbia Gorge Discovery Center in the Dalles and the Columbia Gorge Interpretive Center Museum in Stevenson, Washington. The invitations I will be providing during today's forest therapy are simply verbal suggestions to support you with connecting to the natural world using your senses. You do not need to follow these invitations. Please feel free to follow your own sense of intuition and inspiration. At the end of each activity, I will ring a bell so that you will know to bring your attention back to the group. Between invitations, I'll ask if anyone is willing to share a few words about your experiences in the webinar chat box. So now let's take a moment to settle into yourself and the space. Close your eyes if that feels comfortable for you. If not, just soften your gaze and keep your eyes focused in one direction. Take a few deep breaths and begin to bring your awareness to your body. How it feels to be supported by the earth. How the space around us holds us in its way. how we are surrounded by other living things. How our thoughts arise and then fall away. Turning our attention now to the sense of touch and noticing sensations on your skin. What do you sense with your bare skin versus where you are clothed? Perhaps among these sensations, you can find simple pleasures and invite that pleasure in. Now turning our attention to hearing. What sounds are around you? Noticing the variety of sounds, near and far. Loud and soft. Patterns and rhythms. Individual sounds may combine like chords or a symphony. Notice which sounds give you pleasure. Now, exaggerate the sound of your own breathing, just enough so you can hear it and it blends with the sounds around you. Breathing in through your mouth, notice the taste of air in your mouth, the texture. Breathing out, how does the space around you receive your breathing? Is there something you would like to offer this space with your out-breath? Inhaling through your nose, what scents do you notice? Perhaps moving your head from side to side, up and down, noticing how the scents change as you do so. Before we bring our attention to the sense of sight, gently cover your eyes with your hands. Then slowly, at your own pace, gently open your eyes and then very slowly move your fingers apart, allowing sight to return. take a moment to look all around you. Just noticing. Does anything feel different, seem different, look different? If anyone is willing to share what you're noticing, please go ahead and share your comments in the chat box. This is an invitation to find words to describe what is happening inside of you. Your thoughts, feelings, physical sensations, or all around you. Don't worry too much about what to share. Everything is welcome. So I'm noticing already several comments in the chat box. Clarity, softer and smoother, vibrant, dimensional. Thank you for sharing that. We'll move on to the next exercise now. This one is to walk slowly or simply look around you while silently noticing anything that is in motion in the space around you. If your mind wanders, just come back to observing motion in a relaxed and pleasant way. We'll spend about 3 minutes with this invitation in silence, and then you'll hear the bell. So let's all come back again. And again, if anyone is interested in sharing what you're noticing inside of you, outside of you, please go ahead and share that in the chat box. All right, let's move on to our next exercise. In his book, The Cabaret of Plants, Richard Mabey discusses a new botany, which suggests that plants are sensitive and problem-solving, but bypass the need for self-consciousness and brain activity humans assume are necessary for intelligence and awareness. Plants are capable of storing and learning from memories of what happens to them. Mabey shares about an experiment conducted by plant physiologist Monica Gagliano, who found that mimosa plants would remember the motion of being dropped and would adjust their natural response pattern of curling their leaves as a result of those stored memories. In the beginning of the experiment, all of the mimosas closed their leaves in the typical fashion when they were dropped. On the second and third drop, less did. And by the end of a large number of drops, none of them were closing up even after a month. With this in mind, take a moment to behold the plant in front of you, or simply use your imagination to visualize a plant. Move closer to the plant and introduce yourself, either silently or out loud. What happens if you open yourself up to being in a reciprocal relationship with the plant? How can you sense communication happening between you and the plant? So let's all come back again. And once again, if there's anything that you'd like to share, please add that to the chat box. So I'm noticing in the comments that quite a few of you are having somewhat surprising experiences, that we might think, for example, that there's nothing in motion, but when we really pay attention, there's actually a lot more subtle motion happening around us than we might first have thought. So at this point, you might be curious about how these simple exercises can make a difference for someone experiencing stress or other mental health challenges. To indulge that curiosity, you might simply compare how you are feeling in this moment to how you were feeling before we began forest bathing. Are you slightly more grounded, calm, or relaxed? The more we are exposed to opportunities to experience simple calmness rather than restless distraction or the urgency of anxious rumination, the better we feel in body and mind. The better we feel, the more likely it is that we will seek out connection with others and meaningful ways of contributing to society and protecting the natural environment, thus building self-esteem and interconnectedness. This is the foundation for mental well-being. In our complex modern world, it does require intention to create these experiences for ourselves. In-person forest therapy walks involve several more invitations and then typically conclude with a ceremony of sharing tea made from foraged local plants. In lieu of preparing tea for you, I can make a recommendation of foraging sheep sorrel, dandelion, and chickweed in the springtime in the gorge, the leaves of which are all edible. I want to thank you for devoting your valuable time to learning about and experiencing forest bathing. My hope is that you will continue your exploration of your unique relationship with the natural world at home and beyond, and that in doing so, you will experience a sense of interconnectedness that will help you through these turbulent times. Be well, and thank you again.
Thank you, Zoe, for leading us in those really meditative and calming practices. I think it's super important. And thank you everybody for joining us and taking some time out of your day to partake with us. I was reading some people's comments in the chat, and Jan had mentioned the connection with the plant is simply and softly there on a subtle level of awareness, which is great. I have, as you can see, lots of plants in my room. And then somebody also said at first they thought it was just their breathing, and then they began watching a subtle moving of a branch in the breeze, and they were amazed at how peaceful and relaxed they became. So thank you. Everybody's saying thank you. So yeah, thank you for taking time out of your day. There was one question. So if you do have any questions in the chat, feel free to write them in there. But somebody did ask, what was the name of the book you mentioned and the author?
So that was on a slide. Liz, are you able to pull that back up again? It was on this, yeah, on the additional reading. It's that bottom book, The Cabaret of Plants, 40,000 Years of Plant Life in the Human Imagination by Richard Mabey. I highly recommend all of those books. They're very different. Some of them are more reference and information, while some of them are more how-to, invitations and suggestions for engaging with the natural world, but they're all wonderful.
Thank you. And then someone else did write, and I think we all have some trouble with this as well. I know I do. But what do you recommend for anyone having trouble being in the moment? So much is demanding our attention, and often I see people struggle with emptying their mind and focusing on the now.
Yeah, and I think that's a challenge for all of us most of the time. Part of that is how rapidly technology has become, a primary focus of our waking hour attention. And so our ability to be present and in focus in the moment in some ways has become atrophied because of that. And so I really think that practicing these really, really simple exercises, like just noticing what is moving and knowing that we will get distracted at times, and that's normal, but it's like a muscle. The more we practice, the more we exercise it, the more our curiosity is captivated by just noticing and experiencing with our senses, the easier it gets. And then the easier that's transferable to other moments of our life. If we're trying to focus more on a conversation with another person, our ability to do that is strengthened by practicing exercises like the ones you've done today.
Yeah, definitely. It does take practice. And like you said, it's a muscle that we have to practice and put more intention and active participation in. Okay, if there's no other questions in the chat, somebody had asked, this is the first of a series of talks. Yes, we will have more webinars in the upcoming months. So if you're not signed up to our email blast, you can do so and you'll get notifications for those webinars as well. But if there's no other questions, thank you all so much for joining. I'm going to wrap us up. I'm really glad you all joined us and found this really rejuvenating and calming for yourselves as well as I. And so just a reminder, all of the attendees who joined today are going to be automatically entered into a raffle for a copy of Your Guide to Forest Bathing, Experiencing the Healing Power of Nature by M. Amos Clifford. So you can continue your forest bathing experience even after this session today. And we'll let the winner know over email in the next few days. And if you're not already a member, please consider joining Columbia Riverkeeper. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to bring salmon back from the brink, stop fossil fuel expansion, and ensure clean water for our communities. And you can go to columbiariver.org/donate to learn more and sign up to our newsletter so you can get updated on future webinars and anything we're doing. We have another talk April 7th, that's in the chat. So hope you all can support us, and thank you so much for joining us and taking some time out of your day to be here with us. And I hope you have a good rest of your sunny day, and goodbye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zoe, for joining us.
Thank you.